Hello, my name is Edgar De Luna, and today I will be presenting about anthrax. So, some of the main characteristics of anthrax: it is the causative agent is Bacillus anthracis. It is a gram-positive rod-shaped bacteria that forms endospores, and the endospores can remain in surfaces and even in soil for decades and even days or even decades. Uh, Also, one of the key features of this bacteria is that it produces anthrax toxins that halt the immune response in the early stages of the infection, and they cause the buildup of fluid in the lungs, um, which is one of the main virulence factors of the disease. And then this anthrax is split into four types, which is cutaneous anthrax, gastrointestinal anthrax, inhalation anthrax, and injection anthrax. And here you can see the white capsules. These are the endospores in the Bacillus anthracis. So cutaneous anthrax. So cutaneous anthrax is an infection in the skin. It is the most common form of anthrax and the least lethal. So the infection occurs when spores enter the body through an opening in the skin, and symptoms usually develop within a week, which is usually the same for all four types of anthrax. And symptoms, the most common symptoms, so you can see here, is the black sore that is surrounded by some swelling of the skin, as well as blisters, which usually these black sores manifest themselves in the face, in hands, arms, and in the neck. Without treatment, the mortality rate is about 20%, but with proper treatment, cutaneous anthrax is not lethal. And then we have gastrointestinal anthrax, which is an infection of the GI tract, and it is caused by the consumption of raw or undercooked meat. Symptoms also develop within a week of exposure, and the symptoms are also different to that of cutaneous anthrax. You have swelling of the neck, bloody vomiting and diarrhea, and then swelling of the stomach, sore throat, as well as fever and chills, headaches, body aches, sweating, etc. And without treatment, 50% of patients die. With proper treatment, there is a higher chance of there's a lower chance of survival compared to cutaneous anthrax. So this infection is still very lethal, although it is most common in places where anthrax spores are commonly found in the soil. And then here in this picture, like I mentioned, gastrointestinal anthrax is caused by the consumption of the spores. In this bottom picture, this is a picture of a liver, which is with hemorrhaging caused by a Bacillus anthracis infection. Next, we have the most lethal form of anthrax, which is inhalation anthrax. As the name suggests, it is caused by breathing in the spores. And also something that's very interesting is that symptoms can take up to 2 months to develop, and they also include fever, chest pain, headache, confusion, and probably the most common symptom is the widening of the mediastinum, which is a bone in the middle of the rib cage. So as it expands, it can cause difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, and it can even cause a person to suffocate. So without treatment, inhalation anthrax is almost always lethal, and with extensive treatment, 55% of the patients survive. But I will note here that if treatment begins in one of the later stages of the disease, then the mortality rate is still very high, and the patient will probably die. And finally, we have injection anthrax. This is a modern type of anthrax, which was discovered in 2010 in an outbreak among heroin addicts in the United Kingdom. So injection anthrax is caused by introduction of anthrax spores into the deepest layers of the skin through a needle. And after that outbreak that I mentioned in 2010, there were no cases reported anywhere, and there has never been a case in the United States. The symptoms are very similar to those of cutaneous anthrax, but they do occur. But the only difference is that they occur in the deeper layers of the skin, whereas with cutaneous anthrax, the symptoms are mainly focused in the surface. It can spread. It can also spread faster throughout the body, and it can be harder to diagnose than cutaneous anthrax, which is why during that outbreak, it was commonly confused with meningitis. Next, this is a picture of the main modes of transmission of anthrax. So, like I mentioned, spores that are commonly found in the soil in certain regions which are Central and South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central and Eastern Europe, some parts of Asia. So what happens is that livestock will consume the grass and they will become infected with the spores, and then any person that is in contact with the animal or with the feces is at risk of developing cutaneous anthrax. And then if the animal is slaughtered, then anybody that consumes the infected meat will develop gastrointestinal anthrax. Next, we have transmission. So this is very interesting, and anthrax in a way is unique in the sense that it is not contagious. So you can be in a room with somebody with anthrax and they can be coughing and sneezing, and you will not develop the disease because the droplets are not contagious. To get infected with anthrax, you must inhale the spores. You must consume a meat that is infected with anthrax, or you must be exposed to anthrax spores through a cut in the skin. In rare cases, the discharges of those black lesions that are commonly found in cutaneous anthrax have shown to be infectious, but even then, the risk of transmission is low. Next, we have prevention. So the CDC recommends that you cook meat thoroughly, and that you avoid eating raw undercooked meat in areas where anthrax is common, as well as avoiding contact with animals. They also recommend that you buy your products from the U.S. because, like I mentioned, anthrax in the U.S. is very rare in nature. Also, if you do buy foreign products from areas where anthrax is common, make sure that the product includes a certificate of inspection, which is basically a certificate that indicates that the animal has been, or that the product has been inspected and cleared for consumption or for use by the government. Next, we have the treatment. So, thankfully, anthrax is able to be treated with antibiotics, the main ones being ciprofloxacin and doxycycline, which hinder the growth and they actively kill the bacteria. There can also be used. There can also be you can also use a treatment of antitoxins to counteract the effects of the anthrax toxins, but it must be used in conjunction with an antibiotic treatment or some other drug therapy to make sure that the infection is fully suppressed. And also, there is a vaccine, the anthrax vaccine adsorbed. It is only approved for 18 to 65-year-olds, and it is not. And even then, there are not a lot of doses, and there are not a lot of doses made, and it is not available to the population. It's not widely available. It is mainly restricted to military personnel, some workers that handle animals, such as veterinarians or livestock workers, as well as laboratory workers that actively handle anthrax spores. And the way the vaccine is administered is that you will get 5 shots over a period of 18 months with annual booster shots to build up immunity against anthrax. So anthrax has been around for a very long time. Scholars believe that it originated in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, and some even believe that anthrax may have been the cause of the 5th plague of Egypt in the book of Exodus in the time of Moses. And then Robert Koch developed the postulates of disease using Bacillus anthracis in 1877, and he also used in his studies. He was also able to determine the life cycle of the bacteria. I will note here the first use of anthrax as a biological weapon that was during the First World War, where the German army in 1925 infected livestock, which was then traded to the Allied countries um, from neutral nations. And as I mentioned earlier, the in 2010, injection anthrax was discovered in the United Kingdom in an outbreak among heroin addicts. And then the use of anthrax as a biological weapon has, like I said, the first use was in 1925, but some of the more modern and well-known cases were in 1979 in Sverdlovsk in the former Soviet Union. So what happened was that there were 96 cases of anthrax in a 2-mile radius from a Soviet microbiology laboratory, which was illegal at the time because in 1972 a treaty to end the use of biological weapons was signed, and then the USSR was included. It was the largest outbreak of inhalation anthrax in history. Anyway, the government blamed it on livestock that was nearby, but it was due to an improper installation of air filters in the facility, which allowed the anthrax spores to escape. And then the more well-known and unfortunate incident was in 2001, the Amerithrax case, where letters containing white powder, which had anthrax spores incorporated in it, which made it aerosolized. They were mailed throughout the U.S. Postal Service. 22 people got sick, five of which died of inhalation anthrax. And just to show you how bad this bacteria is, another 43 people tested positive, and in addition, 10,000 were considered a risk of possible exposure, and a lot of the buildings where the letters were mailed to were closed for years to be decontaminated, and it took 9 years for the FBI to finally close the investigation. And then future outlook, following the anthrax mailings legislation was passed to restrict access to pathogenic agents, and more funding was placed on researching pathogens and how to target and prevent the misuse of biological research, which has been pivotal in the years following the Amerithrax case. And finally, today, researchers have been developing new anthrax vaccines to provide immunity in a shorter period of time, but we'll have to see how the distribution and the requirements for this vaccine, because like I mentioned, anthrax in the United States is not is very rare in nature. It is usually only found in laboratories. Here are my references. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to your questions.